Hey everyone, Curse Deck Builder here, making our way to 10,000 decks assisted, and here we are with Jubilant Skybonder. Not a legendary creature because we are looking at PEDH or Pauper Commander. This deck comes to us as one of our donation decks of the week from Shirok. Shirok, thank you so much for supporting the channel. They say, I bring you one of my Pauper Commander decks this time. It's a pretty straightforward white-blue Flyers deck. They wrote black-blue, but it is white-blue. I was hoping to improve its power more. It's more so a creature-focused deck by turning creatures sideways, but I think losing a couple creatures for other cards or swapping around creatures could make it better. I look forward to see how you shape the Sky Horde to make it stronger. Absolutely, Shirok. And of course, they say there's no budget because it's a Pauper Commander deck. Now, not all Pauper cards are cheap, but I'm pretty sure all my editions are very, very cheap. We'll talk about what Pauper Commander is in a second, but I will note, I wanted to thank a viewer who actually don't have their name here. But they did the very, very kind and very obvious suggestion that I could be doing full screen so you don't have to see that address bar. Thank you. I think I'm learning things about this YouTube gig every day. I think that was Rathios1337. Thank you so much. We'll definitely be doing some full screen shenanigans. And as I get better at video editing, you're gonna see some more things. But I think we've gone on long enough. Let's do a quick moment and then we'll get to the deck. If you'd like to take a look at the deck list we're talking about today, or if you'd like to submit your own deck list to me so that I can make a video assisting your deck, please check the video description down below. Alright, so who is Jubilant Skybonder? Whoop, I want the other picture. There we go. Who's Jubilant Skybonder, and why are they our commander of our Flying Matters PEDH deck? So let's talk very, very briefly about Pauper Commander. So Pauper Commander's rules are that all of the cards in your deck have to be commons, but your commander can be any uncommon at all. It does not need to be a legendary creature. Though there are more and more legendary uncommon creatures these days, there is still some merit in just not picking a legendary creature and going with, you know, any uncommon that can fit within the theme. This is really interesting to me. I don't know tons and tons about PEDH, but I am really interested in it, and I love seeing more and more decks being put out there, more play groups that want to play with them. I'm a very, very big fan. So with that in mind, let's look at this creature. So we've got a 3-mana 2/2 flyer in hybrid blue-white, so blue or white, blue or white. They're a human wizard with flying, and they have the simple text that says, creatures you control with flying have spells your opponents cast that target this creature cost 2 more to cast. Now that's not Ward, which I think is particularly important. Ward is a triggered ability that goes on the stack that needs to be answered or the spell is countered. This is a tax. This is just straight up that you aren't able to cast certain spells if you can't pay for it, which is generally much, much stronger. And it goes really well with, obviously, the fact that you can still counter that spell, making your opponents even further behind on mana, but also just like a nice kind of protection spell, because in PEDH, and I might be not universally correct about this, but from what I've seen, I mean, board clears are hard to come by. Board clears are almost universally, you know, put into the rare slot and uncommon slot sometimes. So when all of your cards are commons, getting board clears is really, really difficult. That being said, there are board clears. They do exist, so don't assume you are immune to them. However, I think it is notable that they are very hard to find. So this deck, let's go and look at the deck itself. This deck is very straightforward, and I do really like that. We have a lot of small to medium birds and flyers who their main goal is the fact that they come with evasion. This is an aggro deck with the idea that our opponents just cannot stop all of our evasive creatures. And with the right kind of protection through our commander, a lot of them are going to be able to make it through. Looking at our small collection of sorceries, our small collection of instants, we have a lot of counter magic, which I particularly like to protect ourselves. Sorceries are mainly kind of our removal, and a few little card draw engines here. And then we have some mana rocks and a few enchantments. Deck's very straightforward. If we look down to the curve, I'm a pretty big fan. We can see that we've got 4 4-drops, 2 5-drops, 2 6-drops. That's pretty nice. The majority of our deck is 2 mana. Once again, pretty nice. I'm going to say generally very impressed by the deck. So let's talk about the places that I think we could improve. I will note, because I feel like I should be noting this more often, I'm going to move my mic over here, is that 36 lands is lovely. I do appreciate. You'll get a gold star every time you send me a deck with enough lands. That's free. So, what do I feel is a bit clunky in this deck? Now, there's a few cards I want to specify on, and then the rest of the cards are kind of more dependent on the additions that I want to put in, and therefore, you know, it's more like they'll be replacements. So let's start on the things that I am less a fan of. And the first place I want to start with is our artifact, especially our Mana Rock suite. And the main thing I want to say is generally, do we need these? I feel like these cards are here because they are, how do I put this? They are remnants of an older time. They are remnants of our commander-minded playing. But if you look at our deck, our curve is really, really straightforward. We're not ramping into anything. Our commander is 3 mana. So at the 3 mana slot, the only mana rock that would really, really matter to us would be Soul Ring, notably. And of course, we can't play Soul Ring, so it's not even going to help us here. So 1 mana, at 3 mana, there's not any rocks that'll get our commander out. We've got, you know, a nice collection, let me see, of at least 9 creatures, and at least 1 artifact we can throw out, though we'll talk about that because it is a mana rock in a way. At least 9 creatures we can throw out turn 1. Gataxian Probe, which is just a cycle. So at least, like, that's 0 mana, sorry. So at least 9 1-drops that don't need ramp. And then if we go to our 2-drops, we have 16 creatures that also do not need ramp, one of which is a ramp creature. So with all of these in mind, I really don't think we need to be using slots on mana rocks. Now, I'm going to tell you to throw them all out. Not all of them. I'm gonna pick 2 and keep them. So going through them real fast, Everflowing Chalice is a card that only works with proliferation or when you can dump tons and tons of mana. This is neither of those decks, and therefore we can toss it. Wayfarer's Bauble is nice because it's hard mana ramp, like it's a land into play, and therefore cannot be targeted. However, in a deck like this, if our opponents are targeting our mana rocks, I think we're winning the game. So the value of this card kind of goes down a little bit. Now, there is 1 card here that cares about landfall, and there might be 1 or 2 that I have missed, but notably that is 1 synergy in the deck, and I don't think that's enough. So I'm keen to cut it. Arcane Signet is just the superior version of our other signets, so if we are going to play any mana rock that's 2 mana, Arcane Signet is the correct one. I wonder if I can make it so it doesn't pop out like this. If someone understands how Firefox works, that would be very, very helpful, because I can see this being a little annoying. Okay. So then Field Mist Border Post is another one. I'm putting this under 1 mana. So this isn't mana ramp because you play a land, then you put it back into your hand, and then you play this, and then it comes in tapped. So you're just kind of playing fairly. So it does also synergize with our 1 landfall creature, and I don't think that's enough either. And then the last one I'm going to nitpick is Thought Vessel. You have no maximum hand size. If you reach a maximum hand size in this deck, something is going dramatically wrong. I really don't know what situation where you have 7+ cards, right? You don't have enough card draw, and you're an aggro deck, so you're putting your cards out on the table. I think this is just going to be wasted as well. So the 2 I like are Mind Stone. There we go again. Mind Stone to draw us a card at a certain point in the game, and Commander Sphere for the exact same thing. Now, do I like these more than just playing Divination? Probably not. And so if given the option, I wouldn't play Commander Sphere. I would just play Divination. Because with enough lands and enough of a low curve, I think I just prefer to be up a card, and I'll probably draw into a land. So for me, I would flat out cut every single one of these artifacts. I just don't think they belong in the deck. I don't think they're doing what we want to do here. So to me, it's really easy to just say, no thanks, let's cut this out. Looking at the enchantments, there's at least a few here. So like Tidal Flats is a really interesting one. We can read the smaller text. So blue, each attacking creature with flying, its controller may pay 1. If that player doesn't, creatures you control blocking that creature gain first strike until end of turn. So how does this spell work? It's kind of really confusing. It's kind of like a reverse Ghostly Prison. So the way it works is this. If someone attacks you, you choose your blocks, and then for blue, you put attacks on every single one of their creatures. Every single one of those creatures, your opponent has an option to pay 1 mana. If they don't, your creatures blocking them have first strike and are probably likely to destroy them. So how does it actually play out? And to me, I think it's worse than Ghostly Prison, because the first thing is this. If this is out, an opponent attacks you, they are going to have mana up. They're not going to attack you otherwise. So they'll have mana up. Then, if you want to take advantage of Tidal Flats, you have to block very specifically, right? If someone has a 5/2, you should block with a 2/1, for example, because you want that first strike to go off. But that's just the ideal way of doing it. You might have to block with like a 2/4 because that's the only thing with 2 power that can attack, for example, right? So you have to kind of adjust your blocks in a way as if your creatures have first strike, and then your opponent has the option to take away that first strike, making your blocks not as profitable as you planned. To sum it up, this ability gives too much power to your opponents, right? It gives them too many options, and it lets them have the final say. So in the end, they will be able to nullify a lot of this card, but not all of it. Is that enough for me to suggest don't play it? Well, the fact that it's 1 mana and it's got like this soft power of making people think twice to attack you is kind of nice. But do you really care about your opponents attacking you? You are evasive, you are the aggro player. I think not. I don't think you're playing enough vigilance creatures as well. There's definitely some here, but not enough to be taking advantage of the fact that you need to keep blockers out. I don't have the video up. That's a spoiler. I'm going to have a camera on me soon so you can see my beautiful face, but I'm doing the thing where I'm raising and lowering both hands like a scale and saying, I don't know. It's close. It's close. I really do think, to me, it's a no. But if you did play it, I wouldn't blame you too much for it, but it's really close. Having to hold up the 2 blue mana, I think, is the thing that makes me say no in the end. It's just a little too much. But since you have some counter magic, perhaps that's easy to do. Opal Gargoyle is a 2 mana, 2/2 flying enchantment creature, right? That's all it is. And I don't understand why we want that, right? Because, like, don't we have 2/2 flyers for 2? Like, maybe that's a little harder. Maybe that is a little harder to get than I'm giving it credit, but, like, not so desperately that we would want to, not so desperately that we want to play this, right? Like, this feels kind of bad. Like, and it stops being an enchantment, right? That's the whole idea, because it doesn't say in addition to its, so it just becomes a 2/2 creature with flying. This is it is no longer enchantment. Yeah, this is a weird card. I just don't think it's worth it. I think it's one of the weaker creatures. A 2/2 flying creature for 2 is kind of on par with your other creatures, but like Leonin Skyhunter is just better because you have it out right then and there. So I think this is unnecessarily complicated for what it does. All right. I think this is fine. let's take a look at a few other things here and there. I don't have a lot of complaints with the creature base. I think it's pretty good. And we already have a lot of cuts here. So I might just go into I might just go into my additions, but at a glance, I think, yeah, I think these are fine. I wouldn't mind if we could find, we've got a few cards here now, like, let's see, Crook Claw no, not that one, sorry, Wormfang Drake, let's see, these Silver Drake, and then at least, there's probably some more, but Coarse Skyfisher. All of these cards bounce our creatures back into our hand or exile them for them to bounce back in. And I would like something to do with those ETBs. Now I'm going to suggest some, but that's the last thing. Like if we don't go into ETBs, I think those cards are just a little worse. We do have some like Fairy Seer is here, but I don't know if we have enough at this time. Okay. Let's just go into additions. My additions are really straightforward. I think this deck is very straightforward to build, and I do particularly like that. So this might be a very clean video. First thing I want to do is I want to start putting in some equipment. So I have Darksteel Axe, I have Bone Splitter, and I have Volshock Morning Star. So all of these are just, you know, very simple equipment. Darksteel Axe, I believe, is probably just the strongest one because it's indestructible, but Bone Splitter is cheaper. Both of these just put +2/+0, cost 1 to cast, 1 or 2 to equip, and Volshock Morning Star is 2 to play, 2 to equip, +2/+2. So nice and simply, I think this is just enough to start with. I have one more enchantment aura to put on after this, but this is just a really good start because the main thing we have going for us is our evasive creatures. So immediately I would like to start hitting in for more damage, and now we have permanents that stay in play even if the creature is removed, with the knowledge that our creatures are hard to remove. Right? When the majority of our creatures are just very small, right? Let's just start right at the top and we'll say, actually, let's find that Leonin Skyhunter. So Leonin Skyhunter is a 2/2 flying 2 mana creature. So we go to, let's just use Bone Splitter for our example. Actually, let's use the Morning Star. So we equip Morning Star to it. Now our opponent uses removal on our creature. They have to pay 2 extra because of our commander. So they paid a lot of mana. And what have they gotten rid of? Basically half of the creature. Flying is on every single one of our creatures, so it's not really an ability that is very, like, it's not expensive, it's basically free. So basically they've removed 2 power and 2 toughness from the board, and the other 2 power and the other 2 toughness stay on the board. And I find that to be a really positive deal in a format where it's kind of hard to remove all your opponent's creatures. So this is just really nice. And I think you're going to get very far in aggroing out your opponents with this, or even just making very profitable exchanges, right? Where you can fight a lot, like you can get away with blocking or attacking into much bigger creatures with an equipment like this. And then of course, if we were to put in a lot more vigilance into the deck, we would find that even more successful, right? Because then those creatures go into attack and defense. You can slowly make the Segovian Angel into a Sarah Angel. Slowly, but very possibly, which is, I don't need to say, a very strong card in this format. So with that in mind, equipment is the first place to start. Then after which I want to put in Steel of the Godhead. This is an aura, so it's not as good as the equipment, but it is a very strong one. So it's +1/+1 and lifelink if the creature is white, and +1/+1 and unblockable if the creature is blue. Now, I don't know to what degree we really care about the can't be blocked. The entire purpose of our deck is the fact that evasion is on all of our creatures. However, it is still nice to just, like, you know, close the door on the question of whether or not our creatures can hit. And honestly, we're playing this for the +2/+2 and lifelink especially. Lifelink is a very powerful ability in these kind of formats, and, you know, on our commander, for example, or any other card, it's going to just pump them out of the, you know, out of range of things like Lightning Bolt or other common red removal, and enable them to just start smashing very fast. Now, these are the only ones I put in for equipment, but you could go a lot further if you wanted to. I'll leave that to you. There's a lot of really good common equipment that all it does is add stats. I don't actually know if this is, let's see, from the Lord of the Rings set. Can I find that really fast? There was an equipment for 1 mana that I really liked. I wonder if it is... It is unfortunately not common, but all right. But there definitely should be other cards here that have that same kind of value and power in my mind, where we can just boost our creatures just by power and toughness, not worrying too much about special abilities, attack triggers, and the like, just making our cards just hit a little harder, so turn by turn we get further and further with our evasive creatures. Next, I've got a few creatures I want to add. So let's go through them. Let's go through the ones that are less common here. So speaking of equipment, Parhelion Patrol really catches my eye, as it is, as you can see up here, the only mentor, I searched for this, the only mentor creature with flying. I had seen this on a list somewhere and it caught my eye, and I wanted to see if we had anything else, and we don't. However, this mentor ability is rather strong. We do have a lot of creatures at 1 power, and then we have a few ways to boost this creature's power, such as equipment and enchantments, therefore making this slowly mentor the rest of our group, our creature base, right, and making them stronger and stronger attack after attack. So I'm very much a big fan of this. I think this is a pretty straightforward card. With our reductions in mana cost, I think we're even happier with it. Another one that caught my eye was Sphinx's Disciple, just because it has that inspired text. It basically functions, as long as you get the attack in, it functions as like a Phyrexian Arena or any other, draw an additional card per turn thing, where on your untap step, you will draw an additional card. Now, a 2/2 flyer just isn't that good. We were talking about one at 2 mana, this one's at 5 mana, but we're really playing this for the card draw, which I think is pretty nominal if you can keep this in the air. With that in mind, if our commander's out, the fact that it's going to change the math on removal against the Disciple might make it not as bad. Because right now, as a 5 mana card that gets destroyed by Lightning Bolt, by Shock, by any like low mana red removal, it doesn't feel great. But if we can make that spell cost 3 or 4 mana, I think at least we're not completely out on the exchange and we don't feel as bad. However, once this card is out, and if we can protect it, it is a very, very strong card, and I think we'll be very happy to have it out. Then this last card is going to transition into something I talked about earlier, and this is going to be some draw cards stapled onto our creatures. So Wretched Grip really is here for the fact that it's a 3/4. We're already playing a few 3/3s and 3/4s that come with a cost to be played. This is just another one that I noticed. It is notably immune to some like converted mana cost carrying cards. I don't know how many there are in the format, but it is notable. It also doesn't have a color that can be notable, but I think this is just okay. It's just that art goes really, really hard. I really, really like this card, so I wanted to mention it nonetheless. Like, look how horrifying that thing is. 10 out of 10. But more realistically, these are the cards I would like to suggest. So I looked up all of our Pauper Legal cards that have ETB draw a card. So the best ones I think are like Cloudkin Seer, Inspiring Overseer, Sky Scanner, Tome Raider, sorry, not Tomb Raider. And then there's a few in 4, which I'm a little less interested in at 5. Messenger Jays is interesting because there's a vote thing where you draw and discard, or you, what is the other one? You put +1/+1 counters on it, and so on and so forth, and so on and so forth. But for me, Cloudkin Seer, Inspiring Overseer, Tome Raider, and Sky Scanner are really, really interesting, right? I think the benefit of these cards is, one, when we reduce the cost of them through cards in our deck, we get away with the fact of making them cheaper and cheaper and making that value we gain from them better and better. But they are also like really well statted for the rest of our deck, right? Our decks are generally like we have a lot of 2-power or 1-power creatures. So these 2-power creatures that just ATB draws a card, I think are really nice in an aggro deck because they keep us going, they keep us playing more and more creatures, and then we can take further advantage of them, right? I mentioned before one of the benefits of the cards that either bounce or temporarily exile some of our creatures is that if we pick cards like this, we are going to get to draw a card. Which brings me to a card that I think is missing in the deck, and it is Ephemerate. Now, do we need more ETBs to play Ephemerate? I think so, but I don't know if you really need that many more, because I will say, for what it's worth, Ephemerate is just a good card, right? Specifically, you can use this as a protection spell primarily, and then a bonus ETB spell secondary, right? So when we use this with certain cards, like the ETB cards I've mentioned before, it's great. We get to draw an extra card and we feel good, but the floor of it is that when our opponents overpay for a removal spell on one of our creatures, Ephemerate gets to blink that creature out, wasting their spell and wasting their extra mana. And then on your upkeep, you can cast it if you have a relevant target, but otherwise you're pretty happy with the fact that, you basically countered someone's spell. So I think this is an easy inclusion for this kind of deck. And another one that's an easy inclusion is Prismatic Strands. This is one that I really, really like. I played this in Pauper in Black-White Pestilence, which may be the least surprising deck. If anyone had to guess what I'd play, it's definitely a Black-White Pestilence deck. This is just really, really strong. Not only is it just straight up a fog in a lot of scenarios, it also notably has a really, really easy to trigger flashback spell. And the fog is the floor, right? The ceiling is really, really high, where you can either use this as a, how do we put this, a non-symmetrical fog in combat with your creatures, so your creatures live and their opponent's creatures die, or you can interfere on other combats for the exact same result of adjusting combat so that certain creatures get removed. And I think this is interesting almost in response to Tidal Flats, because Tidal Flats is a card that kind of is really strong against First Strike, and Prismatic Strands is almost like a response where it just doesn't care about First Strike. It gets to redo First Strike math by removing that damage from giving the protection. I guess it's not protection, preventing that damage and letting creatures that could now defeat First Strike opponents actually get it. It's interesting. I will note that once it's in your graveyard, everyone knows about it, but there's a lot of self-power in that, and the cost of tapping an untapped white creature you control is pretty low, so it's just incredibly strong. And that's generally my additions, but I have something I wanted to say. Now, one of the things I really don't like doing often is to suggest a different commander. I just don't think it's the fun of that, but in PEDH, our kind of pool is a lot bigger, and this is not so much of a suggestion, but something I realized that I hadn't thought about PEDH before that I think is worth mentioning for maybe not Shirok, but other players that are going into the format. And that is the application of background. Background cards and background legendaries come in uncommon, which means you get to play partner commanders in a format that's kind of harder to, there are uncommon partner commanders as well. However, I think it is notable that there's not many, so having them there is kind of really cool. And Lulu, Loyal Hollyphant, is a card I saw not long ago, I believe in a flying deck, but I could be wrong. I remember seeing it not long ago in one of these decks, and it's been kind of in my head since then. And I think this is a very interesting commander in this format. Now, it's harder to trigger because one of the main costs of it is something needs to die, but when something dies on your side of the field or a permanent leaves play, which once again, we do have things like Ephemerate, we have things like the core or other creatures that bounce or exile your own creatures, Lulu really pumps up your entire board. Like +1/+1 counter for each tapped creature is very meaningful, and then untap them is just gravy. So this is a pretty good ability, to be honest, for a flying deck. And notably, a 3/2 body to start with is actually also very strong. And then the background is Fay Wild Visitor, which says, once this is out and you have your commander out, when for each player, each opponent you deal damage to with a non-token creature, for each of them you'll make a 1/1 blue fairy dragon. I don't know why I do this. Sometimes I'll read my version of the text as opposed to the actual version of the text. I don't know if that helps or hurts, but that's the way I think of it, is that you have a maximum of 3 1/1 flying fairy dragons you can make, and you get one for each opponent you hit with a non-token. And that's really good, I think. If I told you, if we just reformatted, and I think that's why I speak in a different way, or I read it in a different way, because my brain does this, where I go, if we think of this card as create 3 1/1s every turn, this is an amazing card, right? You got to have your commander out. That's the one cost of it. But this is just very strong, right? And with that in mind, I think this is pretty powerful. And I would use this combination if I myself was making blue-white flying in PEDH. But once again, this is not a suggestion for Shirok. This is just putting it out there. And I think that's it. I think the deck is already very strong. I think this first draft I looked at is very easy to just cut out all the artifacts, add in the equipment, enchantment, and some of the creatures I mentioned. And I think already there we're going to have some success. After that, we can start being picky with cards such as like Aven Skirmisher, which is just a 1/1 flying for 1. And we could probably do a little better with different options. But even that in mind, I think it's a good place to start. If I was building this deck, I would actually try to put more 1/1 flying creatures. Just try to fill that up to see, and then as many equipment I can to attach to them, so that we can be aggro at the start, and then as we cast our stronger and stronger creatures, we can then throw our equipment onto those creatures. Alternatively, as I have Wings of the Guard out, another direction we could be going in later is +1/+1 counters and Proliferate, because there are a lot of reasonable +1/+1 counters. Oh yeah, melee doesn't work. I thought this was Myriad, sorry. But we have a lot of different things that we can do to increase the power of our creatures permanently without having to keep equipment attached to them. All right. Thank you so much, Shirok, for setting the deck. I do really like Pauper EDH, and so I'm very happy to see this deck. And I think it's very fun to play. I love aggro. I love evasive aggro, so I hope this plays well. I already think it does, and I hope my suggestions help. If you'd like to send another version of this deck, or any deck, there is a link in the video description down below. And if you, like Shirok, would like to support the channel to bring your deck to the front of the queue of the donation decks I do every week, there is a link for that as well. Finally, if you could like, comment, and subscribe, my goodness, I would be very grateful. We hit 500 subscribers. I'm probably gonna do a video on that. It may come out as this video comes out. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. We'll see what happens. But till then, thank you for the deck and good luck.